Okay, so please be very welcome to this masterclass. Edward Johnson came from very far, Australia, right?
That's right.
To explain you everything about how to get at Bloomberg as an intern or a staff or in a journalistic position. So here you go.
Great. So I use this the whole time? Yeah?
Oh no, sorry.
No, I've got this, haven't I? Great. Well, lovely to see you. My name's Ed Johnson. I work for Bloomberg News. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I run the internship program for Bloomberg across the Asia Pacific and then through into Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So you're probably thinking, what on earth am I doing in Paris? I wish the company had paid for the trip here. I'm actually here on holiday with my wife and 4 kids. But it's just an irresistible opportunity to come and speak to you. I trawl through hundreds of resumes across the various locations that I look after the internship program, and Sciences Po is always a delight to see. You're such internationally minded young people with great language skills, and it's such a strong journalism course here. It's always great to see applicants from the university. So it was a great opportunity to come in and talk to you. So thank you very much indeed for having me. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. There'll be lots of opportunities for questions. So just throw up your hand, interrupt me at any point, I don't mind. I'll start off by talking a little bit about my career, then I'll give you an overview of Bloomberg News and the kind of news that we cover and some of our coverage priorities, and then I'll give you an overview of the internship program and the application process, and we'll just throw it open to questions. So. A little bit about me then. I've been a journalist for 27 years now, which is kind of a scary thought, really. I started off at a really small weekly newspaper in Scotland called the Alloa and Clackmannanshire Advertiser, and it was great grounding in journalism, really. The thing about local weekly journalism is there is no escape. When you are living in a small community, you've got to get it right. And if you don't get it right, if you spell somebody's name wrong, if you're covering a flower show, if you're covering school sports events and you're getting the tiniest details wrong, people in these communities are going to track you down and give you a hard time. So it's a fantastic grounding for the importance of accuracy in journalism. I did that for about 6 months, and then I started working for a freelance agency covering basically sort of general human interest stories, court coverage, crime, for all of the Scottish editions of the good foundational stuff, really competitive freelance work. If your story wasn't fast, if it wasn't strong enough, it didn't get published, and then the agency didn't get paid for your day's work. So, it really, really keeps you on your toes. Did that for a few years, moved to Australia, freelanced in Australia and Asia for about 1.5 years, and then got my sort of first good break in sort of serious journalism. In about 99, 2000, I started working for the Associated Press in London, which was fantastic. About 3 or 4 months after I started working for them, the 9/11 attacks happened, and it was just a huge story then, and London was right in the centre of it. We had the build-up to the Iraq War, the Afghan conflict. I set up AP's Westminster Bureau in 2003, and then spent the next 3 years covering British politics and diplomatic affairs. It was real high-octane stuff, lots of travel. I was in the lobby and part of a press pack that travelled around the world with the then Prime Minister Tony Blair. So, high-octane stuff. I was in Iraq a couple of times, Iran, Libya, Sudan, covering big stories. It was really privileged stuff to do. Then in about 2006, after our first child was born, we moved back to Australia, where my wife's from, I freelanced for a while. I think probably the most fun I've had in journalism was 3 months working for Agence France Presse in Sydney. And then I joined Bloomberg, initially on the World News team, then covering corporate finance, so sort of syndicated loans, corporate bonds. And then I ran the Australia and New Zealand coverage for about 10 years. And then a couple of years ago, I stepped back from kind of coalface journalism, running the coverage, and started looking after our entry-level talent program, running the internship programs. So, yeah, quite a varied career, and it's been tremendous fun. So, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who's heard of Bloomberg? Let's hands up. All right, pretty good for people watching on video at home. Fairly good show of hands there, which is nice to see. Let's keep your hands in the air then if you read Bloomberg News regularly. All right, not as many hands in the air, unfortunately. And let's have a show of hands if you're interested in a career covering business and finance. One hand. My goal today is to ask the same question in about half an hour's time and see more hands in the air. I'll give you an overview of Bloomberg then. I know that you all sort of do have a fair bit of access to Bloomberg. Alan Katz, the Paris bureau chief, who I've just had coffee with, teaches a course here. Phil Serafino, who I think some of you might know, he taught last year, didn't he? So you'll have had some access to Bloomberg through those lecturers. In essence, we're a really powerful technology platform. We're news, data, analytics, and we write for a really sophisticated audience of financial professionals. There's about 330,000 Bloomberg terminals around the world, and through that service, we're writing for the sort of backbone of the finance community worldwide. Investment bankers, economists, currency traders, stock traders. If you are operating in the financial markets, odds on that you're probably going to have a Bloomberg terminal. If you don't have a Bloomberg terminal, you'll have a Reuters terminal or some other kind of service. And we're providing real-time data, news, analytics, and with a connective tissue of the financial markets, basically. So, the news we write is very accurate. It has to be, because if we get something wrong and people are making multi-million-dollar trading decisions on the information that we're providing to them and it's wrong, then there's obvious real-time implications for that. So accuracy is fundamentally important. Speed is very, very important as well. And objective fact-based journalism as well is really at the heart of what we're doing. So we're writing for financial professionals through the Bloomberg terminal, but we're also reaching a much, much broader audience through the different platforms that we have. We've got Bloomberg TV, which is beamed into hundreds of millions of households. We've got Bloomberg.com, which has about 100 million unique viewers a month around the world. We've got Bloomberg Business Week magazine. We reach lots of people through our various social media channels, whether it's TikTok or Twitter or Facebook. And we're also doing a lot with radio and podcasts as well. So arguably, we are one of, if not the biggest global business, finance, multimedia organizations in the world. We've got about 2,700 journalists and economists and analysts here. Our European headquarters is in London, obviously a very, very big presence across the United States, and then offices across the Asia Pacific as well. Kind of Singapore and Hong Kong both vie for headquarters status. Sydney's pretty big. We've got about 40 journalists in Sydney. And we aim to be the global leader in business and finance coverage. We cover markets, we cover governments, we cover economics, we cover companies, we cover tech. And our newsrooms are really exciting, dynamic places to work. You know, it's extremely competitive because we compete across the entire arc of a story. And from that, I mean, you know, we're competitive with those first flash headlines, you know, when news breaks, whether it's, you know, the UBS Credit Suisse story that's been so big for financial markets just recently, whether it's the sort of the political turmoil, and to own that first 15 minutes of the news cycle. But then we try to sort of own the rest of the arc of the story as well, you know, providing our readers with the so what, you know, the context, the what comes next. And our reporters are doing that across multiple platforms. You know, we're doing it for the financial professionals on the terminal, we're doing it on Bloomberg.com, we're doing it across video and podcasts through social media. So it's a really exciting and vibrant, dynamic place to work. Yes, a big focus for us is business and finance coverage. And a lot of students of journalism get quite intimidated by business and finance. You know, they might not understand it. You know, they probably haven't studied business or finance or economics or commerce. That doesn't matter. You know, you look at my resume, you look at my profile and where I came from as a journalist. You know, I started off as a local weekly reporter. I covered tabloid journalism for a long time. I did politics. I kind of crawled under the back fence at Bloomberg. And like a lot of people in the Bloomberg newsrooms, I learned on the job, you know, and I did that by reading widely, reading actively. You know, if there was a topic that I didn't understand that I came across in my reading, I'd drill into it. I'd sort of self-educate, or I'd just ask people in the newsroom for guidance and advice. And so don't let a lack of knowledge about business, finance, economics put you off. You know, you can self-learn. Bloomberg does provide a lot of instruction, a lot of training, and as long as you've got an inquisitive mind, you know, as long as you've got that sort of passion for current affairs and you're prepared to dig in and learn on the job, then there's a fantastic career for you in business and finance. And I think it's a really, really interesting area of journalism to be involved in as well. You know, like I spent a lot of time covering politics, but kind of butting up against, you know, a barrier through my, you know, where the story would stop kind of here, because I didn't understand the real world implications, the market implications, the impact on the cost of money of stuff that was happening in politics. But once you start getting an understanding of how political developments, general news developments, then ripple through the global financial system and ripple through the markets, you know, there's just so much more you can write. It adds an extra layer, an extra depth to your reporting that's really, really intellectually gratifying as well. So, you know, we're spending a lot of time at the moment writing about, you know, the financial system, the Credit Suisse, UBS situation, the Ukraine conflict is, you know, taking up an enormous amount of our coverage as well. But it's beyond the bombs and the bullets of what's happening on the ground. You know, we're looking at the real world implications of supply chain shortages, you know, the impact on commodity prices, on energy prices, you know. So once you start getting a toehold in that finance and markets and economic story, so much more opens up to you, and you know, there's so much more you can write about. Plus, there are so many more jobs out there in the finance and business space. You know, if specialist journalism now, where it can be commoditized, where people are going to pay for it. You know, there's some tremendous career opportunities in that. Right, so let me turn to the internship program. The great thing about the internship program, it is our pipeline for finding diverse young talent to join our newsrooms. And you come into the internship program. It's 10 weeks. It's paid, which is great, and it's absolutely not a go get the coffee internship. You know, you come into the newsroom, and from the moment you step foot in a Bloomberg office, you're going to be treated like a professional. You know, yes, we give you a lot of scaffolding, a lot of support, a lot of ongoing training and mentoring and coaching, but you are going to be writing journalism from the get-go. You know, training is a big part. Odds on you would come to London for the first week of the internship for a couple of days of onboarding by HR, and then 3 days of intensive training from our training team. They'll show you how to work on our copywriting platforms. They'll give you an overview of our writing style, our story structure, etc. And they'll sort of give you an overview of the Bloomberg terminal and how to extract, you know, the real-time market information and data that underpins a lot of our writing. But from then, you know, you're in the newsroom and you're working. We'll place you on a team for the 10 weeks. Our newsrooms are structured in a team-based structure, which allows a greater degree of specialisation in our writing. So, you know, we've got markets teams, but within the market structure, you might be covering equities, so the stock markets, or you might be covering currencies and bonds, or you might be covering the energy markets. We've got a companies team that we call global business. And within that, again, we drill in. You know, you might be covering transport companies, you might be covering big consumer companies like Louis Vuitton, you might be covering technology, you might be on the government economy team, for instance. So you have that degree of specialisation. But beyond that, you know, if you're a member of a bureau, you're going to be part of a team that's telling that sort of broader, holistic narrative of what's happening in a country as well. So let me tell you a little bit about the application process. Typically, we open up applications for our internships in about sort of late September, early October. We always have internships in the US, mostly in New York, but in some of the other cities like LA and Chicago, but mostly New York. London, every year we have internships in Frankfurt, also in Dubai, and then into sort of the APAC region, so New Delhi, Mumbai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Sydney. And then on a rolling basis, we have internships in some of our smaller bureaus as well. So this year it's Warsaw and Brussels in this part of the world. Last year, for instance, we did Stockholm and Amsterdam. The year before that, we did Madrid and Istanbul. So lots of opportunities. I'll know later on this year where our 2020, it's going to be 2024, isn't it? Where our small bureaus for 2024 are going to be. The application process is pretty long and it is pretty arduous. It starts off with sending a resume and a covering letter. After that, you may get the opportunity to do a recorded video interview. There's a short written test as well. And then for shortlisted candidates, there are interviews with some senior leaders at Bloomberg in the various regions, and also with myself. It is a fairly lengthy process. It does take a few months, unfortunately, but we think it's quite a rewarding process. You know, you do get to network and you do get to meet some really influential people at Bloomberg who look after our hiring strategy. So if you get into the internship program, fantastic. If you don't, then that's not the end of your, you know, potential future relationship with Bloomberg. the internship hiring process gives us a tremendous opportunity to sort of build a talent landscape of the next generation of journalists coming into the industry. And if you make a good impression during those interview processes, if you stay networked with us on LinkedIn, you know, it's quite possible that, you know, we'd hire you after you've got a year's experience at another publication, or 2 or 3 years down the track. So it's a really, really good opportunity for us to build out our networks with the next generation of talent coming into the industry. So that sort of pretty much wraps it up for me. I'm open to taking questions. Yes.
Hi, I'm Juliet. I was wondering, when do the internships take place? Is it in summer of the year?
It's mostly in the Northern Hemisphere. It's summer. So this year's internship starts on June 26th, and it lasts until I think that first week in September. So I think that should work quite well for your university timetable. We do internships out of cycle in other parts of the world, you know, where the university dates might be slightly different. So in Sydney, for instance, we've just wrapped up a 10-week internship there. Our internships in Singapore and India generally start at the end of May, but generally they're in that sort of June 26th period. I forgot to tell you, so it's a 10-week paid internship. Our ultimate goal at the end of that 10 weeks, if you've done well, if you like us, if we like you, and if there's headcount there, our ultimate goal is then to hire you. You know, it's a great sort of try before you buy kind of experience, I guess that 10 weeks. If you can get through that 10 weeks at Bloomberg during the internship, which is quite hard work, it's a really, really good test of whether you're going to be a cultural fit and whether you're going to enjoy the kind of news that we cover. And if we hire you into our cadet program, and we call that our rotator program. We call it the rotator program because over the course of a year, you rotate through 4 core parts of the newsroom for 3 months at a time. So everybody spends 3 months on our breaking news team. They're the people who own that first 15 minutes of the news cycle. You know, they monitor all of the regulatory feeds, social media channels, other media, you know, like if news is happening around the world, like if Elon Musk says something stupid on Twitter and it starts moving share prices, then our breaking news people have seen that and they've moved a quick headline and they've written a very, very fast story. So it's a really, really kind of intense 3 months. You're right in the engine room of the newsroom. And it gives you a really good surface level of understanding of everything that we do. So everyone does 3 months on breaking news. Everyone does 3 months covering markets, you know, whether it's equities, whether it's FX bonds, whether it's energy. And again, that's core Bloomberg coverage. And if you're going to go on to have a career in business and financial journalism, you need to understand how markets operate. So you get a really good foundational grounding for 3 months. Everyone does 3 months on a different platform. So that might be Bloomberg.com. You know, if you're working with our digital team, you'll be running our home pages, you'll be in charge of our social media strategy. You know, you learn a tremendous amount about audience because we're getting real-time feedback on audience engagement on a minute-by-minute basis, depending on, you know, the social media strategy that we've taken, depending on where we've placed a story on the home page, depending on the headline that we've put on a story. So it gives you a really, really great sort of news judgment for a big and growing part of the business. Or you might be on TV. You might be working with our podcast team or our radio team. And then everyone does 3 months on, we call it beat reporting. That's generally sort of stepping back from the coalface a little bit, from the This Just In news, and you're sort of working on your skill sets about how to build sources, how to break news, you know, how to develop contacts, how to get exclusives. And so you might be covering politics, you might be covering economics, you might be covering tech, you might be doing companies reporting. But over the course of that year, you're building a really, really solid bedrock for yourself across all of our core coverage areas. And then after that year, you go into, your entry-level role, and, hopefully the start of a long and glorious career at Bloomberg, where you get the opportunity to work on the biggest stories, to collaborate across all of our global newsrooms, and you get to travel the world as well. I've been with Bloomberg 17 years now, and it's all been in Sydney, and that's largely because I sort of moved there to settle with my family. But, I've had multiple opportunities to move to Hong Kong or Singapore or New York or London. You can really travel the world with Bloomberg. It's a fantastic opportunity to work in an international environment. That was a long answer to that very short question. Yeah. Yes.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
My first one is, well, thank you for being here on your family vacation.
Oh,
Thanks
you're
for
welcome.
stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
My first question is, for somebody who doesn't have previous experience in financial journalism, but who wants to try out for the internship program, what other kind of attributes or experience do you look for that could set somebody apart as a candidate?
Yeah.
And then my second question was just asking kind of more specifics on the cadet program. So is that only for previous interns, or is that for every entry level kind of employee?
Let me deal with that one first, and
Okay.
then you'll probably have to remind me what your first question was, because I'm still a bit jet lagged. The rotator program is typically for people who've done the internship with us, and so getting into the internship program is the pipeline into the rotator program. We have been experimenting with doing entry-level recruitment directly into the rotator program. We've done that in London for the first time. I think we're doing it for the first time in Japan as well. I've just had a direct rotator hire starting with our Japanese language service, and I've got a couple more starting later on this year. But typically, it is through the internship program. We do hire people at entry level straight out of university into roles at Bloomberg. So, for instance, we've just hired a young woman in Austria into Frankfurt, straight into our breaking news team. We actually surfaced that talent through the intern recruitment process. She was shortlisted for last year's internship in Frankfurt. Didn't quite make it, but we liked her. We stayed in touch with her, and so when an opening became available, we hired her into that role. Now, she doesn't get the opportunity to do those kind of 4 3-month blocks in different parts of the newsroom. But the great thing about Bloomberg, even if you don't get the opportunity to do that cadetship program, there's a tremendous amount of variety of opportunities within Bloomberg. If you are hired into the breaking news team, yes, you're going to be in that very intense role of sending flash headlines day in, day out. But we've got really supportive managers, and if you've got a passion project, something that you're really interested in, we give people time away from desk to work on those. There's always ongoing training and nurturing and support and development at Bloomberg. That's really very, very important. Your first question about what attributes are we looking for if people don't come to us with financial and business journalism background or experience? That's the norm, basically. It's the kind of needle in a haystack if somebody has, studied journalism and has done a minor in economics and, has done a 6-month internship at the Financial Times or something, right? It's like, oh yes, thank you very much, But that's rarer than hen's teeth. You just don't often find people like that. So we're constantly looking for diversity through our internship pipeline, and it's diversity in all of its forms. It's gender diversity, it's ethnic diversity, it's socioeconomic diversity, it's diversity of languages, it's diversity of academic disciplines as well. So a lot of people that we hire into the internship program actually haven't studied journalism. We've just hired a young man who's studying politics, philosophy and economics, who speaks Polish, is passionate about current affairs, and he's been working for a political magazine in Warsaw for the past few months, in his spare time. And so he's got that hustle, he's got that drive, he's got that determination. And that I think is kind of the distinguishing factor of what we're looking for in people. Tenacity, drive, determination, ambition, that willingness to dig in, to confront the void of not knowing a topic, but actually being willing to learn on the job. And through the internship program, and even through the cadet program, I say to people, what we're looking for is steady progress, right? In 3 months, you are not going to be an expert at markets coverage. It's just not going to happen. You can spend a lifetime covering markets and learn new stuff every single day. What we're looking for is for you to go from there to there during that 3 months. And if you can work on that kind of trajectory, that's exactly what we're looking for. And so we're looking for that kind of spark, that grain in people's resumes. So yeah, it doesn't matter if you haven't got business and finance experience, but craft a narrative in your covering letter about why you're interested in digging in and learning about business and finance journalism. If you are serious about getting into business and finance journalism, just start reading a bit more widely. Read the FT, read the Wall Street Journal, read Bloomberg. Start thinking about the sort of the global narrative of what's happening in markets and how the country that you're in, the country that you're based in, fits into that sort of global picture. We're writing a lot about the pension reform debate in France at the moment, but we're not writing about that in a vacuum. We're writing with international comparisons, and that's that's at the heart of all good international journalism. Explaining to people why it matters, why it's unique, if it's not unique, how it compares with what's happening elsewhere in the world. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. Don't be shy. Is now the point to ask for another show of hands about how many people are interested in business and finance? Oh, there's another hand there. That was good. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Hi.
I guess I was just wondering, because oftentimes we say that financial and economics reporting is all about desk.
All
you
about
do
what, sorry?
Being at your desk and just
Yeah.
you doing things not on the field. And I was just wondering if you actually go on the field sometimes, and if you do, what do you do there? And that's just my question.
If you actually go out.
If you go out on the field, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of journalism now is desk bound, right? Like when I worked at AP in London all those years ago, you had the choice of getting off your chair and sort of walking 200 metres through the Palace of Westminster and going and watching Question Time live in person in the room, right, in Parliament, or are you going to sit and watch it on a live feed at TV where you can flash headline on the train and actually go there in person? So it's finding a balance. Contacts, if you go to a big conference on a certain topic, it might be a city banking conference. You'll go there, you'll cover the speakers, you'll network, you'll build out your contacts book. You'll get your face known, right? every opportunity. Yes, there's lots of opportunities, and we encourage our reporters to go out and about. Also there's loads of opportunities on the ground reporting. A lot of what we do is underpinned by data, but it's the human voice in a story that lifts it, that makes people want to read the story. So, our Sydney intern, who's just wrapped up, she did a lovely story looking at the bounce back in international student numbers, global industry that supports 30% of Australia's international student numbers wouldn't let its citizens leave, right? And so when China announced, I think in sort of January, February, that it was opening its borders, to this immediate bounce back in international student numbers in countries around the world, but particularly acutely in Australia. So, she's trawling through the databases, she's digging into the numbers, but she's out there on campus talking to students, interviewing lecturers, covering strikes and protests by university lecturers who, are starting to see the finances bounce back and want a slice of that and want their own wages to go up. So yeah, we want you out there. We want you sort of covering a story in person and live and getting out of the newsroom. Yeah. Yes.
And also, can you investigate? Because you are in touch with big firms that you need to...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it might be hard for you to do that as an intern. You've got 10 weeks. Me personally, I don't do an awful lot of reporting at the moment. I'm too busy sort of reading people's resumes, unfortunately. But we do have an investigative team who does nothing but big investigations. Alan Katz, the Paris bureau chief, was on that team for several years. Market fixing of electricity prices, traders deliberately withholding electricity supply in order to sort of cause price spikes. And, they blew the lid on that, and it led to a parliamentary questions in Westminster, and, journalism like that can actually change the system, which is very gratifying. But yeah, I mean, whether it's a big into the answers. So yeah, we do a lot of work like that. Is that what, are you interested in investigative reporting?
Yes. Hi, could you tell us a little bit more about data journalism in Bloomberg, and if you're hiring as well in this field?
About the what, sorry?
Data journalism. Data
journalism?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I mean, we're finance journalism. It's everything has data underpinning it, right? So whether you're writing about house prices, going through the roof, and people not being able to get a foot on the housing ladder, whether you're writing the pension reform debate in France at the moment, you're comparing. I mean, one of the fascinating numbers around that, and I'll probably misquote this now, the percentage of France's GDP that goes toward paying for the state pension, I think it's something like 14%, is that right? And it's kind of like double the OECD average, right? That's data journalism, right? It's an international comparison that immediately puts your debate here in an international context. So we're constantly working with numbers, right? That's the basic expectation of everything that we're doing day in, day out. But beyond that, there are more sophisticated data journalism projects that we do, and graphic visualization of that. I don't have any slides with me, unfortunately, but we did a lovely piece about a year ago out of China. One of our reporters who covers consumer companies, she kind of anecdotally noticed that Chinese consumers weren't buying Nike, weren't buying Puma, weren't buying Adidas as much. They were starting to buy local brands more, right? So she was thinking, well, why is that happening? What's happening here? And she spoke to a few people, and she started to get an inkling that there was an element of consumer nationalism taking place in China. At times when international criticism of China's politics and policies was increasing, then there was this kind of nationalistic response from Chinese consumers that they stopped buying Western brands, right? Which is quite interesting. So she managed to get exclusive access to like an online database of transactions through a company like Amazon or Alibaba, right? And over the course of at least 6 months, she looked at all of this data. They scraped it, they codified it, they used Python and I think R as well, and they managed to show that at certain points in time there was a spike in Chinese buying of domestic brands, and it coincided with Western criticism of what was happening in Xi'an with allegations of forced labour, made public declarations that they weren't going to use cotton sourced from Xi'an. That was when you saw that spike in sentiment. So what we say with a lot of our data journalism is, don't start by staring at a spreadsheet and thinking that you're going to get some kind of divine inspiration from the numbers, right? Get the story idea first, talk to people, get the anecdotes, get the gut journalistic feeling of what's going on, then go to the numbers and use the numbers to sort of validate and back up. And we're doing that sort of stuff all the time. So we do a lot of data journalism. We don't force our journalists to learn Python and R and coding skills, but we provide that opportunity. We encourage people. There's a wonderful third-party platform called Data Camp, which we subscribe to, and we encourage people to sort of build up those skills from basic Excel through to more sort of sophisticated and advanced Python. And it just opens up so many more avenues to your reporting if you can scrub and codify and interpret data using those. It's one of those kind of boxes we like to tick. Yeah. Who out of you asked, what do we look for? One of the things that we look for on people's resume, that if you can sort of get out there and show that you're working as a journalist, you've got that tenacity and drive to get yourself published, whether it's in your university magazine, whether it's in, the arts and culture section of, your weekly or monthly local magazine, whether it's Le Monde or, wherever else. You can do, is that, people were laughing then, is it quite difficult to get published in Le Monde as a student? Okay, yeah, I'll look out for that then. But if you can, just keep on writing, right? Keep on publishing, keep on trying to find ways of showcasing what you can do. If you can't get published in the mainstream media, showcase what you can do on personal blogs.
Or is it something else? Do you cover proper stories on podcasts?
On podcasts?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got various podcasts out there. I mean, we should do more, right? We should definitely do more, but and we're currently sort of building out our production crew. Ideas that people in the newsroom have got don't suddenly reach a bottleneck. So I think but she might sort of have some unique reporting on what that's meant in India, that week. So Stephanomics is a great one. We've just we've just done some pilot podcasts, which actually my Sydney intern, with her story about international students, did a podcast. It was great, actually. It was wonderful. She'd written this kind of 800-word feature about this bounce back in international student numbers. The next day, she recorded has anyone seen our quick take video on social media? You know, those short, sort of bite-size, sort of 1 minute to 3 minute videos. If you haven't look at Bloomberg Quick Take on Twitter. They're great. So she did a video. So she's gone from print to thinking in the sort of visual format. And then, you know, the podcast editor said, "Oh, I really like that story. Let's do a podcast." And she's like, "Oh my God, you know, like I've never done." Now she's got to sort of think in terms of sound, and it was a great experience. So she did this one story across these 3 different formats. It was wonderful. So yeah, I mean, we're launching new channels and new products all the time. But again, just, you know, wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple or, you know, wherever, just kind of type in Bloomberg and you'll see various ones. There's a fun one called Odd Lots. There's a guy called Joe Wiesenthal who's based in New York, and Tracy Alloway. And they do this kind of really quirky kind of back and forth conversation about weird stuff that's happening in the markets, which is quite fun as well. But yeah, it's one of the really fun things about working at Bloomberg, and I think it's one of the reasons that I've stayed with the company so long. Yes, we write for the terminal. Yeah, it's serious stuff. We've got to get it right. We've got to be fast, and we're just sort of conveying information that's going to move the markets. But beyond that, we've got this wonderful sort of cross-platform universe and such a diverse audience that we're reaching now, and a much younger audience as well through our social media channels. It's a lot of fun, and podcasts is the newest element of that, where we're really starting to expand into that space. Yeah, hi.
Actually, I'm not a student here. I am a colleague at AFP. I'm a business journalist myself for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I was wondering about your take on something that I found that people were always asking about business and finance stories. Is people saying that's so dry, that's like not real world, that's not, you know, the person on the street who's trying to like live their life, and it's not connected to that. And I feel strongly that's not right. And I was wondering about your take on why is that. What do you think about? Is that dry and unrelated, or what's the connection to the real world?
I'm glad you asked that, because I'm kind of evangelical about this, and every time I speak to students, I'm trying to hammer home this message that business and finance and economics underpins everything that's happening in the world. I mean, it doesn't matter what, you know, whether you're a socialist or whether you're whether you're a socialist and don't believe in the capitalist structure, you know, or whether you're kind of a merchant banker. It's undeniable that stuff that's happening in the world of business and finance is going to have a direct impact on you, whether you like it or not, right? My mother lives in the UK. Her energy prices have gone through the roof because of the conflict in Ukraine and energy prices spiking, you know, and she faces that daily decision of whether to put the central heating on up to, you know, 22 degrees, 23 degrees, or keep it at 18 degrees, right, to keep her bills down. That is a direct consequence of global conflicts and the impact that that's having on the energy markets. You know, what's happening with, global interest rates and the battle against inflation is going to impact the price of your baguette when you go to the... I can't believe the price of baguettes. You know, I'm going out in the morning and buying, 6 pain au chocolat and 6 croissants, and I'm going, oh my goodness gracious me, that's like 15 euros. That's insane, right? So it's impacting your pocket all the time. Global interest rates impact the price of money, impact global borrowing costs, impact the price of your mortgage, which impacts demand for property, which impacts the price of housing. You know, it all flows through. And I think once you start realizing that, once you start sort of seeing the interconnectivity of everything, that's when business and finance journalism becomes really interesting and relevant. And we don't do it with all of our stories, but we try to bring that human element into our coverage, particularly when we're writing for the other platforms, you know, when we're writing for Bloomberg.com, because that's when it all starts to make sense to people. Do you cover business and finance for AFP?
Yeah, I've been in Paris for the last couple of months. I've covered German economics out of Frankfurt for 5 years before. So I've met a couple of your colleagues there while covering the cars and the planes and everything. So I kind of that's why I raised my hand. While I know Bloomberg and I do read Bloomberg. Obviously.
And how did you get into business and finance journalism then?
Because I did the program here, which is journalism and international affairs, and on the international affairs side, I chose international economics, basically. Yeah. So I kind of have a double degree hat.
Yeah.
And this is why when AFP hired for Frankfurt, they were looking for someone with that kind of business as well as journalism experience.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
That's how I ended up there.
Yeah, I like AFP. As I say, I worked there for 3 months in Sydney. Didn't write about business and finance. I think I mostly spent my time writing about shark attacks and crocodile attacks, you know. But what's that?
Mostly cricket as well, right?
Yeah.
A lot of coverage there is sports, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
One last question, maybe? Do you have a final word?
Final word, you know, just apply, right? Throw your hat in the ring. It's competitive, but it's you know, it's a great start in journalism, doing the internship program. You know, the bylines, the experience you get, that kind of working in a collaborative, real-time news environment can be a fantastic springboard for a future career in journalism. You know, if it's not for you, if you do the 10-week internship and you think, actually, you know what, I don't want to be covering business and finance, it's still such a fantastic formative experience for you. You will learn so much. You will get a suite of bylines, you know, across multiple platforms that can really make you stand out in a very, very competitive industry. And if you know, I would encourage all of you as well to just read really, really broadly and widely. You know, don't just read the French media. Don't just read the US media if you're American. You know, don't just read the British media if you're British. Like, think across formats. Think across publications and time zones as well. You know, and building out that sort of knowledge by reading widely, by listening to podcasts widely, etc. You know, you're building up a knowledge base that you'll be able to draw on at some point in your careers. Yeah, just be very, very open to different experiences and influences. But thank you very much indeed for having me. It's been very, very nice to see you all. Great.
We can take it off.
Yes.